Afternoon, everybody. Welcome to probably your first session of the afternoon for Trailhead DX. The Salesforce development experience is rapidly transforming today. As you go through this conference, you're going to see how you build, decompose, and integrate your applications will be much different in the very near future, like tomorrow. Because we at Salesforce, we're committed to creating a more modern approach to our Salesforce development experience. Of course, our most famous slide, please make all of your purchasing decisions on currently available features. My name is Christopher Marzilli. I work in platform success here at Salesforce. And I've been working with the Salesforce platform both as a customer, a partner, and an employee for over 13 years. I've seen a lot of change in that time. I remember when Visualforce was first introduced. I also recall when the REST API first became available. But as my team was preparing for this conference some months ago, I took a look around at the development experience we currently have and looked and tried to think about what is going to look like in the very near future. I envisioned 3 critical transformations that are coming to developers that will change the way you and I work on the platform. I believe there's a renewed focus on what has traditionally been a bit of an underserved market, and that's us, our Salesforce developers. I think the fact that we're here at Trailhead DX for the second year in a much larger venue shows that we have a really renewed focus on our Salesforce developers. And we need to start thinking about these transformations that I'm going to talk about to understand how we're going to be able to utilize them to build our apps in the future. And we need to understand how we can incorporate all of the benefits of these new transformations that are coming. I have a lot of links in my presentation. I have a bit.ly link here that you can take a picture of. I'll also throw it up at the end of the presentation. So without further ado, let's talk about the 3 transformations that I see coming to the Salesforce developer experience. The first one, as you may have ascertained from our previous keynote, is source-driven development with Salesforce DX. No longer is Salesforce going to be this special little snowflake in the development world. You'll be able to drive your your application development off of source versus off of an org. App decomposition is one of the other big shifts that are coming. And this is coming in the forms of Lightning Component Framework that's going to allow you to decompose your apps into different pieces and reusable pieces. And the last piece is an event-driven architecture. Salesforce has always been known for its great metadata platform, but it's really lacked is an event-driven architecture that has enterprise messaging with a new feature that we released in this summer called Platform Events. So let's dive into each of these subjects and talk a little bit about them. With source-driven development, DX and our new CLI is changing the source of truth. Before, the source of truth has always been a Salesforce org, whether it was a production org or a sandbox. What the source of truth was always one of those orgs. Now, with Salesforce DX, we're moving that to a version control system. Again, no longer will Salesforce be this special little snowflake in the development world. Your source of truth will be your source code and your version control system, like most other modern development platforms. Your code, your metadata, your configuration, your test data, even the shape of your org will all live in a version control system that you can branch and fork with your development teams. You'll be able to track changes in and out of your various orgs. To start, it'll be tracking your changes through your Scratch orgs, but eventually you'll be able to hook into your sandboxes and your production orgs. The main piece of Salesforce DX and really what drives the source-driven development is the CLI, our new command line interface. You'll be able to create orgs for dev, for you to use, and also for your CI tools and your CD tools to quickly spin up. You'll be able to synchronize source to and from these orgs from your file system. You'll actually be able to push and pull, similar to your pushing and pulling from Git. You'll be able to push and pull from your Scratch orgs and your file system to keep them in sync. And if they ever get out of sync, you'll actually be able to run a command that shows you the status of your orgs and what's dirty and what's not. You'll be able to import data, and you'll have into both dev and test environments. You'll actually be able to build a test plan through a JSON that'll allow you to quickly import data in these Scratch environments. You can actually create and execute tests. So no longer are you limited, by the way, to just Apex testing. While you can kick off Apex tests through the CLI and script that and script continuous integration, you will actually have the ability to script other types of tests, whether it be a JavaScript test framework or even a Selenium framework that you can incorporate as part of your continuous integration. And then you'll also be able to package all of these changes up and you'll be able to move packages around from org to org and actually check these packages into source control. The CLI is a very powerful tool. You should definitely go and download it. I'm sure you've heard people talk about it, but it combines many of the capabilities across several Salesforce APIs, such as the metadata API and the tooling API. It also combines functionality from other Salesforce tools like the Force.com migration tool and also Salesforce Workbench. Through the CLI, you can do things that you probably only did through either the developer console or the Workbench, where you could actually query Salesforce and write SOQL statements and execute anonymous Apex. It's an extremely powerful tool that now that it's a CLI, it can all be scripted. You can all automate this. So you'll be able to script your continuous integration from your local computer, also from a cloud computer. The CLI is an equal opportunity tool. You can use it for your day-to-day development, pushing and pulling from your Scratch orgs, doing your development through whatever IDE or text editor you want to do that. And then also it can be automated. You can have your whatever continuous integration system you want to use. You can actually script it. It can pull in the CLI binary, spin up a Scratch org, push all of your source code from your version control system into that Scratch org, and then run all of your tests. It can then report back out to you, and then it can destroy the Scratch org like it never existed in a completely automated, almost headless fashion. And this is all, again, built from source. It's really the single go-to tool that you're going to use as a developer going forward. Now, currently, I want to caution everybody, it is in beta. You can turn it on in your production orgs. You can download the CLI and start playing with it today. And we hope to have it. We had an excellent pilot that we had over 2,000 developers working in the pilot, and now we've opened it up to everybody who wants to use it. You're going to want to learn more about this tool. So there are almost 25 sessions today and tomorrow. There's some great ones out there. Definitely try to attend a few more sessions around this. There's a hands-on workshop that's happening. I don't have time to talk about each of these sessions, but there's 3 that I think are really important that you should check out if you have a chance, if you're really interested in this. First, Introduction to Salesforce DX. The Summit Theater, which is right over there at 1 p.m., Wade, who's the product manager for this area, is going to be talking. If you can't make it today, tomorrow in breakout room 3 at 10:15, he'll be giving the same presentation. Another presentation that I'm really excited about is Become a Salesforce DX Ninja. This is by Dave Carroll. This is again in the Summit Theater at 4:45. Full disclosure, I'm going to be there because I'm excited to see what he has to show. He's going to show you how you can not only use the CLI, but also extend the CLI through plugins. And then if you want to get your hands on, there's a continuous integration and continuous delivery Thursday at noon in the Summer Theater that Josh is going to run. And he's going to show you how to script that CLI and continuous delivery that I've been talking about. Outside of this event, you'll also want to hop on to Trailhead. We have 4 new trails. The Salesforce DX development model will get you started. App development with Salesforce DX will show you how you can download your source as part of a package and play with it and push and pull it. The continuous integration using Salesforce DX is a great module. It'll actually show you how to use GitHub with Travis CI to build a headless integration environment. And actually, as you check things into Git, it'll automatically do a build for you and run your tests. It's really cool. And then if you need some help with Git and GitHub, you can learn the basics on this Git and GitHub trail as well. Like I said, it is an open beta. You can enable the Dev Hub in your production orgs. If you're not ready to do that, you can actually get a trial org for 30 days and sign up here. Again, there's another link here for you to sign that up and play with your trial org. Moving on to app decomposition. So this is a pretty big change in the way we think about how we build apps. For a lot of years, for most of the time that I've been developing on Salesforce, Visualforce was always the go-to customization tool when you needed to build kind of a new app or a new functionality that didn't really fit well in our standard page layouts. Well, there's some issues with Visualforce, right? It's very page-centric. It's not very reusable. You can't necessarily use a Visualforce page and another Visualforce page. It's all server-side rendering, requires full round trips to the server. The server actually assembles all the HTML code and sends it back out to the browser. So it's a pretty heavy post and reply process. Fairly kind of old if you think about the modern architecture that we now have. Extremely high latency because you are really communicating a large bundle of information all at once. Well, Lightning kind of flips that all on its head. It's very different. It's all component-centric. We need to start thinking about Visualforce pages not as a single Lightning component. You shouldn't be thinking about, hey, I want to take this Visualforce page and make it a Lightning component. It actually should be a group of components, right? And these components should be independent, and we should start thinking about having administrators really assembling components through the app builder versus developers building Visualforce pages, right? And this makes the components much more flexible and also makes them reusable. So no longer can a Visualforce page just be a one standalone page. You can take a component and put it on a whole bunch of pages all over the place, a whole bunch of apps, really. The client rendering is now server-side. Once it makes that initial push and gets the page from the server and loads your components, the components can communicate individually with each other and to the server. It doesn't require a full round trip. It doesn't require the server to build out that huge HTML and send it out to the end user. You can actually communicate with from Lightning components back to the server and then back to the component without doing a post. And it doesn't require all the other components to also be refreshed. So very low latency and very high interactivity. This is very common in modern frameworks, developing with other JavaScript modern frameworks like AngularJS and React. The Lightning component contains a lot of different pieces, but ultimately it's JavaScript, it's HTML, it's CSS, and a lot of other web-enabled code. Components can communicate individually or with the server without requiring a full page refresh. Just so you know, if you're thinking about, hey, now I got to move all my Visualforce pages to Lightning, that might not necessarily be true, but the good news is you can reuse a lot of your Apex. So Lightning components can actually communicate with that same Apex controller that you built for your Visualforce pages. So a lot of your Apex gets to be reused. And again, it doesn't require that full page refresh. You can simply call out to the method you need in the controller, and it'll return back the data or the query or the update that you made. And each component can do that. Components now become the building blocks that can be used independently with the Lightning apps and pages. Again, we need to think about taking those pages and breaking them up into individual pieces, and then allowing administrators to really assemble those pages using the app builder. You can also build your own apps as well and assemble them, but who wouldn't want to push more work off on admins anyway? So, using those app builders, you can build your custom components and then, again, allow those administrators to drag and drop them in a declarative way. So let's take a look at what this really looks like. Here I actually have a page from our Dreamhouse app. If you guys have seen it, it's a pretty cool, highly customized Lightning app. This is a Lightning record homepage. In Visualforce, this would be all one page, and it will be a hell of a lot of code, all right, to get this all done. And I'm not saying it's any less code with Lightning, but what I am saying is that now you have all of these very beautiful Lightning components that are all individuals, right, and that were assembled on the page by the admin. And there's both out-of-the-box components here and custom components that we built. I didn't build them. Some of our Dev Evangelist team built them. What's even cooler is that we have tab elements standard out of the box, and you can hide other Lightning components behind some of these tabs. What's really awesome about the low latency of Lightning is that it doesn't load these until the user actually clicks on the tab. So again, you're not sending a whole bunch of information to the user that the user might not even need until they click on the tab. What's even cooler is that that's a standard component. This is these two components are custom components, but guess what? They're the exact same component. What we did is we added a design element to them that allows the administrator, when they dragged and dropped it on the page, to change the way the component functions. And in this case, because this was a Dreamhouse app and we're looking at a house, it was searching for similar properties. On the top right, you can see it's similar properties by price, and bottom here, you have similar properties by bedroom. All right, and this was just a drop down on the component. It's part of the design element of Lightning components. So an administrator can take a Lightning component and actually use it multiple times on a page if you give them access to customize your design. Lastly, up here, gone are JavaScript buttons. I'm sure much to lament here. But what you can do here is you can create Lightning actions that become buttons on your record pages. And those buttons can actually can be Lightning components in and of themselves. It can give you a modal, or it can actually fire off some code that you have in a Lightning component. So now you have the capability of building custom buttons that are going to function just like Lightning components. So don't just think about Lightning components as things you plop on a page. They can also be actions that can be taken from buttons as well. So by the way, all this I'm showing here, again, it's part of our Dreamhouse app. It can actually be downloaded by going to dreamhouseapp.io if you want to play around with some of the source code here. There are tons of Lightning sessions here. There's actually the Lightning Theater is right across there. There's basically 2 days. There's 15 sessions. The coolest one that I saw was create amazing apps quickly with Lightning components. That's today at 3 p.m. You might want to check that out. There's the Lightning Lookout that's also over there. If you guys are concerned about moving your org to Lightning, they're doing Lightning readiness consultations over there, so you can go talk to some experienced Lightning ambassadors that can help you kind of ease that pain and talk to you about how to transition. And there's the Lightning Now programmatic workshop tomorrow morning at 9:15 over in the Amplify workshop if you want to kind of play with Lightning, get some hands-on experience. After the conference, there's some great trails, as you would imagine, for Lightning. The trail that kind of matches best with this session is decompose your apps into components. There's also a great blog about Lightning components best practices. I would get familiar with that because Lightning, it's not the same as Visual Force. It's very different. And if you're unfamiliar with some of the new modern kind of JavaScript frameworks, this is a great place to kind of start and to make sure that when you build your Lightning components, you're building them right the first time. And then the next blog one is how to create admin-friendly Lightning components. I wanted to include this because I talked about that component that was on the page twice. That's using that design aspect of it. And the more capabilities you give to your admins to customize your components, I think the less components you'll be able to have to build, and also the more interactivity you can have between the admin and the developers. All right. Event-driven architecture. So this is a big new, kind of brave new world for us. First, before we even talk about what it means for Salesforce, let's talk about what is event-driven architecture. It's an architecture that promotes the production, detection, consumption, and reaction to events. All right, so it's a little bit different. You might think, well, we have triggers. Well, triggers are built on a metadata platform, and what we're talking here is really an enterprise messaging platform. An event can be defined as a significant change in state. The best part about how it's going to work in Salesforce is you get to decide what that is. It doesn't necessarily have to be a record update, by the way. It could be something else. And then it allows for quick integration of disparate systems and allows to decouple long-running processes. Where this really shines, an event-driven platform in and of itself inside of Salesforce is really not all that exciting. What it really shines is how we integrate. And it's going to be a new integration solution here at Salesforce. So platform events was GA in this summer's release, so it's brand new. Similar to creating custom objects, you can create custom events. It's now basically a first-class citizen in Salesforce. I think for a long time, the strength of Salesforce has always been its custom metadata platform, and now we are bringing a scalable enterprise messaging platform baked right into Salesforce. All right? You can publish events internally using triggers, or declaratively using flows or process builder. External apps can publish events using the REST or SOAP API. And then internal subscriptions can be done via triggers right now. Soon, in a future release, you'll be able to subscribe using flows and process builder. External apps can subscribe and can consume the Salesforce API through the Bayou Wire protocol on Comment D, very similar to our streaming API, if you're familiar with that, except the difference between the events API and the streaming API is that the streaming API is really a SOCL query when it comes down to it. This is each event that you create, each custom event you create will have its own endpoint that you can consume. What we have here is, the diagram I have here is really, you have a standard Salesforce object called order, and someone makes an update to that order. You can have your order trigger publish an event to the Salesforce message bus, to what I'm calling the custom event that I created. That message bus can have multiple consumers. In this case, I have a shipping app that's outside of Salesforce, wired into the event API that's listening on the Comment D protocol for events. When it sees an event come its way that it wants to consume, it can consume it and then do something with it. So in this case, let's say the order was placed. So now the shipping app sees that an order was placed and it now needs to ship it. So it ships it, and then it can publish back an event to the same message bus to say, hey, that's been shipped. We have a trigger listening on the message bus, when it sees that a shipped event comes through, it can then update the order status to complete that cycle. So now the order's gone from placed to shipped, and something has happened externally to Salesforce. Now, oh, sorry, I thought someone was asking a question. So now this is kind of a very simple example, and yeah, you probably could have done this with something like outbound messaging or an Apex web service, but really, what really drives the value of platform events is real-time orchestration and integration with multiple systems. So you'll be able to create workflows with bidirectional external web services. You can hook into other enterprise messaging platforms like a Kafka or a MuleSoft and be able to share events with each other. And again, it helps decouple those long-running processes that you don't necessarily need to wait for in a fire or forget integration pattern. And they're also extremely durable, right? These events can actually be replayed for up to 24 hours. Each event that gets sent out will have a replay ID. And your external systems that are listening, if they see something out of order, you can actually go back to that replay ID and then replay all of the events that have happened since then. So it's extremely durable. This should be able to promote agility and flexibility by decoupling apps and removing those tight dependencies. So we're hoping to eliminate a lot of point-to-point integrations that you've probably created in the past, and also be able to have that kind of durable event messaging that allows to decouple all of our long-running processes. The goal here is simply to make integration with Salesforce easier. So instead of just having to be a data integration, you can have event integrations as well. Talking about some of the sessions, there's event-driven architectures with platform events is happening at the Summit Theater, right over there. Jay Hurst, who's the product manager, is going to be speaking. I'd highly recommend that if you're interested in this session. Also, there's a hands-on Summer 17 platform events over at the Foothill Workshop today at 2:15. So check those out if you want some more information. There's some great resources available already. There's 2 trails, a basics trails, getting to know how to use events. And then there's a great project, how you can actually set up an eventing platform that communicates with another app, actually internally within Salesforce, so you can see how events can even be used both internally and externally. There's this blog post that some really awesome guy wrote named named me. It's called First Impressions with Platform Events and the Salesforce Messaging Platform. This was, I was first introduced to platform events a few months ago, and I just kind of recorded, how I first started using it and interacting with it and playing around with it. And you can see my thoughts about, how I first went to get using it. It's actually really simple to use. So I'm going to open it up to questions, but before I do, I'm just going to sum everything up. The 3 transformations I see coming that we all need to think about and learn how to take advantage of is source-driven development with DX, the app decomposition with Lightning, and event-driven architecture with platform events. So I have a few minutes here. I've opened myself up to an incredible amount of information, so I'm excited to see what kind of questions you guys have. So if you have any questions, please raise your hand. I'm happy to answer them. Over here? Anybody? No questions? I covered all of this stuff and nobody has any questions? Oh, here we go. Speak up, because
What kind of support are we going to see in the enterprise messaging platform to actually be able to subscribe to platform?
So the question was, what kind of support will we have for enterprise messaging?
Right, so if we look at some of the large ESG platforms,
Yeah.
Jackson, they want integrated. Do they have now, or do you know if they're deploying support?
Oh, okay. I know some of our integration partners are building plugins. I don't know, what the status of those are. I know MuleSoft and Boomi and IBM are building it so that their enterprise message bus and our enterprise message bus can communicate together. It's probably not available yet, but it's coming. That's a great question. So the question is, can the Salesforce Enterprise Message Bus used to be exchanged events to different orgs? The answer is yes, not really out of the box, because you'd have to pick one org to be your main message bus, and then for the event, it would have an endpoint API. You can consume that in the other orgs, but you'd need to build something that can consume Common D, which I believe you could do through a Lightning component. The trail that I had up earlier, the project, actually uses the Lightning component that monitors the message bus. So I think you could probably play with that and build that out, to communicate between orgs. Yeah, it's a good use. Sorry. Oh, is there a particular integration with Heroku? It's another good question. That is, we have something coming on the roadmap for that. I can't really speak to exactly how that's going to shape, but yes, there is a Heroku roadmap integration on the roadmap. Yeah. The platform events is available in summer 17. Sorry, I meant to throw this up there. That's the bit.ly link if you guys want to download my presentation.
How large an org does DX actually work?
I'm sorry, can you close?
How large an enterprise org does DX really work with? Is there a limit? Like, do they equip that?
Yeah, the question was how large of an enterprise org does DX work with? And actually, it was built with some of the largest orgs in mind. So there's no really limit to how many developers that you can have on the platform. I'm sorry, it's really hard to hear you.
Size of the metadata?
The size of the metadata? Yeah, it doesn't, it shouldn't have an issue with downloading it. I know some of our customers that are very large, it did take a while to push the metadata into a Scratch org. And what we recommended to them is opposed to trying to take all of your code, and all of your configuration, is actually you break it up into unmanaged packages so that you're working with those packages as opposed to just the whole monolithic code base, which is ultimately the long run goal of DX. The next piece of DX is really packaging, which we're going to be piloting very soon.
What can publish the event? Is it only the trigger or something like the UFC protection like the JavaScript can?
Yeah. So the question is, how can you publish an event? Is it only a trigger? In my example, I used a trigger. You can use Process Builder or Flow, but really, even an external system can publish it via the SOAP or REST API.
No JavaScript.
I mean, not natively. Yeah, there's not a native JavaScript publishing yet. But if you were using a Lightning component, it could call an Apex controller that it could then publish it. So it could be just an Apex class that can publish it as well. It doesn't have to be like a trigger. It could be any Apex.
Is the events platform a bulkified solution? How does it handle?
Yeah. So the question is the platform events a bulkified solution? Not yet. Right now, you're limited to about 100,000, I think, per day or per hour. I'm sorry, I should have had that number in my head. But we are in the very near future going to add something called high volume platform events, and that will be a much more bulkified solution for a large mass enterprise eventing platform. So the question was, what's the difference between outbound messaging and platform events? So the biggest difference, one, is the protocol. Outbound messaging is a SOAP-based, contract-first SOAP-based protocol that we define that your systems need to conform to, and it only fires with a workflow. So if you're in a situation where you're not necessarily firing a workflow, you can't really use outbound messaging. And outbound messaging is a little bit of older technology now. With platform events, it uses a very, it uses the Comet D protocol right now, but we're going to add additional protocols in the future. We have no plans to add additional protocols with outbound messaging.
Salesforce DX, is that only limited with Salesforce IDE or Workbench? Can we use that with Maven's Mate or
Yeah.
like?
So the question was, with Salesforce DX, the CLI, do you have to use a particular IDE? The answer is no. We did update our Eclipse IDE to consume the CLI, and so you can get the functionality there. But I'm sure Maven's Mate will be coming out with an update, but there's not a limitation. You could even use a text editor with the new CLI.
The external system which is trying to consume the platform events,
Yeah.
they don't have a plugin already developed. So what technology we need to use? Like is it REST API?
No, it's not a REST API. It's the Bayou protocol with a Comet D. So there's actually, if they don't have the capabilities to consume something like that, you could use a middleware partner that can do it, because most middlewares can consume our streaming API. And right now, like I said, it's only the Comet D protocol. We're going to add other streaming protocols in the future. Yeah. Yeah.
Question for Salesforce DX.
Yeah.
In case of integration scenarios where we have authorizations or orgs consuming our certificates, authorizations, how are we going to spin up in the Scratch orgs, or how will we be that piece into that?
So what?
So,
Can you say that first part again?
so in case of integration where
Right.
where our org is connected to another org, so I have a spin up an org, but now I have to configure that authorization layer into my Scratch orgs.
Yeah. Okay. So the question is around using integration with Scratch orgs.
Right.
If you're going to be testing integrations, I don't think Scratch org is the right place to do it. It's more about developing. I would still use like partial and full sandbox copies to test integration paths. So I don't think that's the right, like I don't think Scratch orgs is the right use case for integration testing.
And can my Scratch orgs subscribe to changes in the version control system? So like I have got 10 Scratch orgs and there's 5 developers which are pushing changes from their own Scratch orgs. But can I have like this event driven architecture or something like that?
Yeah.
So can I design an end-to-end deployment solution?
So the question is, can Scratch orgs subscribe to your source control?
Yeah.
And actually, it's kind of backwards. The answer is no. You subscribe to your source control, and then you push the changes. So Scratch orgs are meant to be personal development environments, and the idea behind it is that in a modern development world, you get your source code, you branch it, and you start working on it, and then you do a pull request, right, to have it merged into the things. And then once you get it merged, you can pull it back down and then push it back up into your Scratch org. But there's no way to have your Scratch org subscribe to everybody else's changes. The idea would be, as changes get put in your pull requests, that it kicks off builds for continuous integration, and that build creates its own Scratch org, pushes all the source code to it, runs your tests, deletes the Scratch org, and then gives you the results of the tests. All right, so check out the continuous integration trail on Trailer. All right, last question.
What protocol did you say to subscribe to the messages?
So the question was the protocol to subscribe to the platform event messages. Comet D. Comet D. Yeah. Cool. All right. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a good business.